Hi students, today we're going to be talking about Chapter 9 from our textbook, Partnership with Families. And you can see this is my lovely family, my two sons, Noah and Colson, and my stepdaughter, Adia. Objectives for this chapter, there are several, and what I want you to do for each chapter is when you start the chapter, before you dive into the text, please go ahead and look through the objectives. Think about what you know about each item. You have a lot of prior knowledge that you bring to each of these chapters. So especially this chapter is about family. We all have our own families, and so we have a lot of information and knowledge that we can bring. So I want you to think about what you already know about these objectives, because that activates your prior knowledge and it will help you when you're going through the chapter to build on your existing knowledge, your schema, and it will help you to retain that information and move that information from your from your short-term memory to your working memory. So it's really a learning strategy and a way for you to retain the information that you're reading. So first objective is to provide a historical perspective on family involvement. And number 2, define the concept of family uniqueness and explain how this concept affects teachers' practices in early childhood education. The third objective, list the components of family-centered practice. Fourth, describe the various ways parents and families participate in their child's program. And finally, list 5 or more ways for teachers to communicate with parents. So if you think about those objectives, I'm sure that you have lots of information already from prior experience, your own experiences, things you've read, things that you've seen. So take a moment to reflect on these objectives before diving into the rest of the chapter. All right, so historical perspectives on family involvement. The role of family in planning, implementing, and evaluating early childhood special education programs has changed dramatically. So think about why. What are some reasons why you think that special education programs have changed over the past few years? What are some of your thoughts? Early intervention services have moved from being child-centered to being more family-centered. So if you think about a child who's getting early intervention services before the age of 3, the document that's used to guide the services is called an IFSP, an Individualized Family Service Plan, versus after a child is 3, they have an IEP, which is an Individualized Education Plan or Program, and that focuses more on the child, whereas an IFSP focuses on how the family together will support the child. We also have legislative support for family support. Family uniqueness. What is a family? The answer is constantly changing. So again, think about how in the last 60 to 70 years, our image of family has changed from the 1950s, the 80s, and now in 2018, what does a family look like? My family, for example, is very unique. It's kind of like the show Modern Family. I have a blended family, so I have 2 stepchildren along with my own 2 biological children. My oldest stepchild is a transgender male. So when I met my husband had a daughter, Bella, who has transitioned or is in the process of transitioning to a male. So that definitely is unique about our family. And also my mother-in-law is married to a woman. So my son has 3 grandmothers, my mom, his father's mom, and his father's mom's wife. So we have a very unique family. I'm very proud of the family, but it's not your traditional family. And this is what a lot of families look like. They might look different from mine, but they're also not your typical nuclear family that we may, envision in our mind based on sitcoms from, the 80s or 90s, where you have 2 parents, the children, maybe extended family living in the home. So we have a very unique family, and that's part of the tapestry of the world that we live in today. Families are individuals who care about one another and often have a bond. So if you think about that, that can extend beyond just people who you are related to by blood. It may be a group of individuals related by blood, units that have made a commitment to share their lives. So there are lots of different versions and forms of family. Think about, what do you consider your family? Who is part of your family? And why do you consider them part of your family? Family is also a cultural group that you are attached to. One must become culturally competent. Learn about the families that you serve when you're working with children. Work with cultural mediators. Learn words from their language. Families will really appreciate you taking the effort to learn words from their language. Take time to work with interpreters and use forms of communication that are acceptable to the family. Recognize collaboration. Collaboration is really, really key when you're working with families. For families of children with disabilities, research has been done on mothers' reactions. Fathers are considered for long-term care. Attention needs to be paid to grandparents and siblings as well. I know in my case, my mother is a huge, huge help with caring for my son Colson, who is medically fragile due to a genetic mutation. And my sister, who unfortunately recently passed away, was also a huge, huge help in caring for my son. So family is often invaluable in helping families with disabilities to care for their children. Family adjustment. So upon finding out that you have a child with special needs, grief is typically the first emotion. The family grieves for the loss of the normal, healthy child they were planning for. In CD 44, I share a poem called Welcome to Holland. So for those of you who have not seen or heard Welcome to Holland, I recommend that you Google it or look for it on YouTube. It's called Welcome to Holland, and it's a very moving piece written by a parent of a child with special needs who comes up with a really, to me, a very appropriate and beautiful metaphor for what it's like to be a parent of a child with special needs. So that's Welcome to Holland. Decisions need to be made, causing stress. Families need to work together for the benefit of the child and family stability. So there are a lot of considerations to be made when you have children with special needs. Their day-to-day care, what kind of services are they going to receive, therapies, are they going to need to attend a special school, are they on any particular type of medication? So just depending on the needs of the child, there might be additional considerations made. And, sometimes that can cause stress for the family in trying to balance all of those things out. There are 3 key elements for family-centered practice. The first one is emphasis on strengths. So what are the thinking of it from an additive model versus a deficit model. So what are the strengths? What does that family have that is going to help strengthen the unit, that's going to help support the child in their development? Promote family choice rather than mandating what a family should do. Encourage families to be able to have the freedom to make well-informed choices. Develop collaborative relationships. That's a theme throughout child development courses: collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. And that's a collaboration between families, schools, teachers, other resources in the community, and the child when applicable. Enabling and empowering families. Enabling is creating opportunities for family members to become more competent and self-sustaining with respect to their abilities to mobilize their social networks to get needs met and attain goals. So letting families know that they should feel empowered to be able to seek out resources, to be able to ask questions when they don't understand. It's really empowering for families to know that they have the ability to be able to advocate for their needs and for their children's needs. Empowering is carrying out interventions in a manner in which family members acquire a sense of control over their own developmental course as a result of their own efforts to meet needs. And something interesting that's happening right now with the regional centers, for example, regional centers are statewide foundations or organizations that have funding to help support children with special needs. And a lot of children get early intervention services before the age of 3 through regional centers. And then after the age of 3, if you meet one of 5 criteria, you can continue to get services from the regional center. And some of those 5 criteria would include diagnoses such as autism, cerebral palsy, intellectual disability, epilepsy, for example. So with the regional center, they're doing something, they're piloting a program called self-determination, and this ties to what we're talking about here. So with self-determination, selected families in this pilot program can utilize funds that they would be receiving from the Regional Center for Services. They would be then receiving those same funds, but the families themselves would be able to determine how to utilize those funds for their child's needs. So if they wanted the child to go to a special and get hippotherapy and riding, horseback riding, or aquatherapy in the water, but that wasn't something that the regional center necessarily approved, the family, through self-determination, could then say, I'm going to use those funds for these services that I would like for my child, or for these resources, or for this adaptive equipment for my child. So that is an indication of kind of the trend that's happening. I shouldn't say trend, but the way that regulations are changing, so that it's giving families more autonomy to be able to make choices that work for their particular families. So that's a good thing. Parent participation is important. What is the rationale for parent participation? What do you think? Should be a lot, right? Parent participation is important. Parents are the first teacher. Skills are learned faster when practice is done at home. Early intervention provides support for parents. Consistency of expectations is maintained, and parents know their child the best. And I can attest that this is really, really important. For me, when I see my son in therapy, whether it's physical therapy, speech, occupational therapy, feeding therapy, and my son also has an LVN that's with him during the day. So it's really valuable for us to see the therapies in the clinic-based setting, and then when we come home, we can try to reinforce and practice those same things at home, because imagine how much more time is being spent working on those tasks rather than just the 1 hour in therapy. So that's really important too. Degree of participation. Parents cannot always do as much as they would like, or caregivers would like to do too. So here are all of the different barriers. Work schedules, other children, attitude towards child and child's problems, culture, and parental education and health. So there are a lot of different barriers that sometimes make it difficult and challenging for parents to be able to participate in their child's development, their child's services, their child's needs. There are different types of ways that parents can participate. They can spend time in the classroom. I love being able to spend time in my son's classroom. I've been fortunate enough to be able to do it periodically for most of his life that he's been in the classroom. And so it's really, really nice, especially for me. Not only is it nice to be able to help support his learning in the classroom, but to see the way that he's able to interact with other children. And also for me, it's an opportunity to be able to talk to and bond with and network with other families and other parents who might be visiting the classroom, or who might be doing dropping off or picking up. So for me, and I think for a lot of other families who have uniquely able children, I think it's really powerful to be able to connect with and get that support from other families and caregivers. Other ways that families or parents, caregivers can be involved is to take leadership roles, complete projects at home. And again, with parent observations, they must be welcome at any time, and then there should be classroom space designated for visitors. Establishing trust is also key. So think about how you establish trust and how important trust is just from a child development perspective. And just in our everyday lives, even as adults, how important it is to be able to have people in your life that you can trust. Teachers need to work hard to develop trust with the parent. This can be done by talking to the parent honestly and sharing both strengths and things that need to be worked on. Share concerns in a caring manner. I think that's really, really important, to be sensitive to the parents, and to frame things in a positive way. Protect a child's confidentiality. That's also really important as well. What are some ways to communicate with parents? There is a list here. You can do informal exchanges, telephone calls, written notes, including emails, texts, photos and videos, class websites and email updates, newsletters, parent and teacher meetings, parent support groups, parent feedback, and home visits. One of the things that I really, really like about the son the school that my son is attending now is that every week they have parent support groups. And so I think that's really, really important. And so I've been able to attend, and it's really nice to be able to hear other parents share their joys and their challenges and to offer support for one another, and just to have a safe space to be able to share some of our concerns and some of our successes. And so I think that is a really huge part of being able to foster that community with families of children. So we've gone through the key elements of chapter 9. So now let's go back to the beginning, our objectives. Let's revisit them and see how much you have added to your prior knowledge. So objective number 1, if you recall, is to provide a historical perspective on family involvement. Our second objective, define the concept of family uniqueness and explain how this concept affects teachers' practices in early childhood education. Third, list the components of family-centered practice. Number 4, describe the various ways parents and families can participate in their child's program. And then finally, list 5 or more ways that teachers can communicate with parents. So think about it for a few moments, how you would now answer these or respond to these objectives based on how you were previously able to respond. And don't worry if you need to go back through the PowerPoint or go back to the text. But the idea is that when you activated your prior knowledge at the beginning, you're creating these, I like to use the metaphor of a closet where you have coat hooks. You have these different coat hooks of your prior knowledge, and then as you go through the chapter, you're hanging a coat, you're hanging a scarf, you're hanging a jacket. That's the new knowledge that you're hanging on those already existing coat hooks. And so you're adding new information to your previous knowledge, and so that's going to help you retain that information. So I highly recommend at the beginning of each chapter, read the objectives first, think about what you already know about those concepts before going on to read, and then go back at the end, revisit those objectives, and then really reflect and think about how much new knowledge you have added, and maybe some misconceptions have been clarified and more details and more elaboration has been added to what you already knew. So thanks a lot. We'll see you next time.